think are important to our job that are not what I call overt issues, and really important to growth. So the last couple, 2 of the days this week, anyways, we're at a conference, and one book that was constantly referenced, actually one of my favorite books of all time, is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And a couple things that were brought up that were mentioned were this graph on how you spend your time. Okay. So there's 4 categories in this graph. I'm going to find the graph real quick. Okay. Here we go. So there's 4 categories in this graph, and it separates the order of things that you have to deal with, responsibilities, I guess is the best way to put it. And so if you look here, it's got quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Quadrant 1, this is something that they focus on big time at the thing that we're at. Quadrant 1 is urgent and important, stuff that you need to do right now. Quadrant 2 is not urgent, but important. So stuff that you don't need to do right now, but stuff that will be important, stuff that is important. Quadrant 3 is urgent, but not important. Like, it's got to get done, but it's not going to end the world if it doesn't get done. And then quadrant 4 is not urgent and not important, which is stuff that you want to eliminate, right? And the reason why this is important to me is because the last couple weeks here it's been really difficult to get stuff done that's important to the company and important to our future growth, right? So most people that come here, they don't come here just to make an income. They don't come here because they love door to door. They come here because they want to grow into a role, or they want to grow a certain set of job skills or whatever. And that's typically why they come to the company. So one of my jobs, probably my most important job, is to focus on how we as a company can help people grow into who they want to be and what they want to do. Therefore, what they want out of life, right? So one of the things I noticed over the last couple weeks is that I've really gotten bogged down with a lot of the urgent and important stuff, and urgent but not important stuff. So, for example, yesterday I spent a few hours getting some stuff together that I really shouldn't have gotten together, like had to get together. Now, I did have to do it because we wouldn't be here today doing these hours if I didn't do it, but it's stuff that we've gotten together before. It's something that I should be able to do over time. It's not something that should be urgent and important, but instead it got pushed into that category. Things like one-on-ones, they're very, they're important, but they're not urgent, right? So for most people, one-on-ones are kind of fall to quadrant 2 or quadrant 3 here, right? Where they're either not urgent but important, or urgent but not important. Meaning, it's not that the person's issues aren't important. It's just that what they want to go over might be able to, somebody else might be able to help them even better with that than I can, right? So if it's a script issue or a production issue, it might be better for the manager to go over with them than myself. So, what I wanted to, the thing that this challenged us to do was to look at how much time we spend on past, present, and future things. And what I've been talking about the last couple of days is the amount of time that we spend on that. Now, when you're starting in a company, obviously, I mean, almost all of your time, if not all your time, should be focused on, at least at work, that present production, right? What are we doing today? What are we getting today? The future production will come if we're producing in the right way now, right? So that's where you want most of your time spent, if not all of it. For managers, a big part of their job is focusing on the present and a little bit on the future. We really don't have to focus on the past. You want to learn from the past, but you don't have to focus on the past. But you want to be able to focus a little bit on the future, and mostly on the present. Who am I training today, and how am I growing my team for tomorrow? For me at this point, my job should be, probably 50-50, future and present, with not much past in there. And instead, I get caught up in the day-to-day. Now, the reason why I say this is because the way that things are going to change over the next couple of weeks as we kind of reshuffle and open up some positions and roles for people is I'm going to do training every Saturday. I'll have one training every Saturday. But if for example, we're going to be doing training, let's say, during the week, then that will be between Andrew and Cole, or Andrew and Seth, or Andrew and Mo, to plan and execute. And I might do a little bit here and there or whatever. One-on-ones that I do will be more focus on growth. If somebody's ready to go into or potentially ready to go into a sales or management role, then they'll be focused on things like that. Or if somebody has questions or whatever about how they can grow in the company, they'll be focused on that. So I lead off with that because as we start the training, I want to point out that a lot of the things that we're going to go through today, I don't have all the best answers for. Some people that started a couple days ago might have some better answers than I do. There's definitely going to be people that are better at canvassing than me. The thing that I bring, I guess, with experience is the ability to be able to understand what's going on, to understand a problem, and to see it from a customer's perspective, from a training perspective, and from a canvassing perspective. And I hope I never lose that, because to me, that's probably my most valuable asset is my experience and ability to be able to see those things. And then to be able to affect change on those things. So that's what I want to go through today, is a lot of those things that can affect change on. I'm going to bring up a Microsoft Word document here. I'm just going to kind of keep track of the things that we bring up. That way, if we need to touch back on anything that we can. 1 second. Okay, I just had about 80,000 documents open. That's good. Great. Okay. Now, what I want to focus on today, I want to be able to answer whatever issues or questions or whatever anybody has, but I'd like to focus on big ticket kind of things. What I mean by that is sure, we can go over a specific rebuttal. I think that's good. I think it's good to go over stuff like that. But is that going to solve, one house per day for you? Or, is there a way that we can make a conversation that can solve 20 houses, also solve that house as well? So as we bring up issues, just realize that I'm going to answer your question. I'll open up your question for other people to answer. And then I'll probably direct it into like the larger picture and what that means overall. So, let's do this way. What I'd like for you guys to do is think about what kind of issues you might be experiencing out there on the road. Now, I think that the number one thing to realize is that, how do you know you have a problem? Well, if you've been here for more than a couple weeks and you're not averaging at least 2 leads a day, then there's an issue with your production. Okay. There just is. If you're averaging, 2+ leads a day, but you have a cancellation rate of above 45, 50%, there's a whole separate issue. Same thing with demo rate below 90%. There's an issue with that as well. So all of those things are solvable things, as long as they're brought up. But think about what your numbers look like. If you don't know your numbers, it's a whole separate issue. But I'll point out that out of the top 5 or 6 lead producers in the company, there's not many people out there that have below like an 85% demo rate and above a 50% cancellation rate, even if they're at the most leads. Okay. So for example, I was explaining this to Dylan Grubb yesterday. He was asking about his cancellation rate. I said, well, you wrote over 100 appointments so far this month. You have a 57% cancellation rate. There is 7 other people that have a lot less leads than you, in some cases, many less leads, 10 times less leads than you, that have the same cancellation rate or higher. Okay. It doesn't, your lead production doesn't mean that you have to have a high cancellation rate, right? And just because you're getting laydowns, by the way, too, like let's say you're someone that's just getting laydowns, that doesn't mean that they won't cancel. Okay. It's important to treat those appointments right too. So I'm going to open it up by saying, okay, maybe let's do it this way. Either put up your little yellow hand or put in the chat box what kind of questions or issues you're running into, or just unmute yourself and say it. I don't care either way. Okay. But I'm going to open it up to you guys first. What kind of things are we going through right now that maybe we need help with?
Hey, I got one for you.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically, one of my biggest problems right now, like at the beginning, I was like explaining too much about like window problems. And then now I'm kind of like not explaining enough. And I don't know that like middle ground, I guess you could say.
Okay. Why do you feel like you're not explaining enough?
Like I would just say like glass impaction. Like I would just mention the glass impaction, and then I would just say like that causes drafts in the house. And then are you feeling these drafts more in the front or back? Before I was explaining it to like the point of like the vinyl on the outside of the window expands and shrinks on hot and cold weather. That puts pressure on those panes, creates gaps in the windows, puts drafts in the house. But I was either like steamrolling through it or like they weren't understanding what I was saying, I
Yeah,
guess.
I go with option one first, to be honest with you. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, you have glass impaction here, which occurs because of warping. Now you're going to have drafts because of that, whether you fill them or not. Do you have that more in the front of your home or your back of your home? I don't think there's a
Okay.
problem with going through it like that. I really don't.
Okay, keeping it simple.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about what the customer can take and what they're going to understand, right? They don't understand even the word glass impaction, but explaining it to them by saying, expands and contracts and all this stuff, warping handles that, right? So think about
Yeah.
the easier ways to explain what you're trying to say to get them to stay involved, because what ends up happening is the customer can disconnect from what you're saying, and maybe they don't understand you, or maybe they're not even hearing what you're saying, right? Does that
Yeah.
make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah. All
Okay.
right.
I'm going to open that up to other people too. So who else on this call either has that issue or has some insight into how to deal with that issue? And just either raise your little hand or unmute yourself. Or if you don't have anything, that's fine too. I'm just going to give you like 10 seconds to answer. And I'm going to grab the microphone while you're doing that. All right, I got some more insight to add to that if we don't have anybody that wants to speak on that. So and I realized I was going to have a quiet group today for the round table discussion. Where's Seth when you meet him, I guess?
No, I got a question though.
Okay, go ahead.
So I've been like setting appointments and then like they cancel, like saying not interested, like the next day or something like that. Like, how do you fix that problem? And like they know they have issues with their windows.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
So I want to handle this one first. I'm going to get to that one. Okay.
All right.
I'm having an issue typing today. I'm typing every word wrong. All right. So you're having a lot of next day cancellations, right? Is that correct?
Like I talked to them, they know they have issues with their windows, but like they just say not interested later on for whatever reason.
Okay. So that you're not setting them there, but
No, I am setting them, but like I see like in the notes they say like, oh, they're not interested now or whatever.
Okay. All right. So cool. We'll go over that in a second then. So yeah, with the window problems, just to kind of finish that up, we get a message in the chat here. Okay, and we'll go through that one after this. All right, so Charles, I'll handle that one as question 3 here. All right, so we got some rolling now, so that's good. So with the window problems, yeah, I think keeping it simple is good. I think pointing out what you see is good, not relying on what you can't prove. And I think speaking in terms that that are very exact is good. So if you say, for example, do you feel this problem more in the front of your home or the back of your home? Fine. But speak in a way that doesn't allow them to escape that problem. So for example, I'll stick with the glass impaction example. So, sir, the first thing I noticed walking up is that there was warping in your glass. We call that glass impaction. That's going to happen because of the windows are warping because of or you could say just because of the heat and the warping in the windows, the vinyl windows, and it's going to cause drafts, whether you feel them or not. So when you bring it up like that, it's very exact. They're going, whether you feel them or not, you're going to have drafts, right? It makes it less easy for the customer to kind of wiggle out of it, right? So that's the way that I would approach an issue like that. You can keep it simple and get the customer to agree. And Charles, that kind of rolls into your question too that you put in the chat, which I'll go through in a second. So we'll come back to that. With the next day cancellations and stuff like that, Anthony, there's a million different answers there. So I'm going to give you the easier ones first, and then we'll get into some of the more the ones that are a little bit less easy to see. Okay, so the first thing is obviously with any cancellations, and this is not going to apply to what you just brought up about the customer saying not interested, but I'm just going to put it down anyways for cancels in general, is having 2 phone numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I get it that they're getting a hold of yours, so that's not going to apply to you. But in general, for cancellations, that's one of the biggest things we run into. Okay. Now the second thing that will happen is the customer's lack of interest or their spouse's lack of interest. And there's ways to take care of that, which we'll go over in a second. Can anybody think of any other reasons why a lead will cancel? Like, and I don't mean like, oh yeah, this one person canceled one time because of X. I mean, in general, something that happens pretty often. Andrew, you got anything?
You don't, let's say there's like an excuse that comes up, you don't deal with it, you push through it.
Okay, cool. That, yeah, that makes sense. How do I write that down? So, not dealing with objections at the doors. Why else do window or do leads cancel? I think another one could be ignoring scheduling issues. Or I guess scheduling issues in general. So Fox and I were just going through a callback that he was calling where this woman, her wife was very sick, and it's not like, you know, sick, like sick as in like you know, in care, in medical care. And she's like, oh yeah, I can do this, but we have appointments over the next couple of weeks, right? Now I was explaining to Fox, there's ways that you can set that, you know, and make it a good appointment, but no doubt some people would just steamroll through that. Okay, well, what time does that appointment end? All right, great. And they would ignore the actual issue, or they would not be sensitive to the issue that the customer has. And the customer might set, you know, you might be able to push them into it, but it's not gonna sit. It's not gonna, the person's not gonna be there for the appointment, or they'll cancel on confirmation, right?
So
What
Paul,
but
so I have a question about that because I actually had like the same thing happen. Where the lady's husband was sick. How do you I don't know if you were gonna go over it, but like how do you go about like setting that but still seem like you know like without it just being like, oh, this guy doesn't even care that my significant other's going through something, he's just worried about setting the appointment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me write that down because we'll get back to that. Okay. So let me write that down here. So I'm gonna put that on right after, because this kind of has to do with this one, but it's a whole kind of separate thing too. So when it comes to, so Anthony, for yours first, so we have a couple different, these are the reasons why something will cancel. Now, can we think of any other reasons why a lead will cancel? Like significant ones. Okay, so I agree. I mean, there's probably some more in there. Maybe we can come up with some more as we go. But I think these are the biggest ones, you know, in terms of like things that you can do stuff about. And I think that the ones that are going to, Anthony, affect you most when it comes to what you're bringing up is this one right here: customers lack interest, or the spouse lacks interest, and we're not dealing with that at the door, which sometimes you can't. And then, as Andrew said, not dealing with objections generally at the door, you know, kind of letting them kind of fall down. I think ignoring scheduling issues could be a thing too, but those two are probably going to be most likely things, because with this, you kind of know when it's happening. With these two, it's not as obvious, right? So the person could seem interested, but not have a complete, not be completely committed. So there's a couple steps that I would bring those appointments through. If you realize that you're having an issue with cancellation rate, and a lot of these leads are canceling within a 2-3 day window, or within the confirmation window, if you see that, then I think the first thing you want to do is, you know, look at all of the notes on your leads. That'd be the first step I would take. So look for any kind of commonality. Okay. So examine the notes on the leads. Look for commonality. All right. And then you can call these back too. So this is kind of an extra step, but the reason why it's valuable to call them back is because customers will tell you, they talk to you already. They have a certain commitment to you that they don't have to the call center. Right. So when you call that person, you say, hey, I just wanted to follow up just to see how things went, or see how things are going. I noticed that we could not make it out there to see you. They're going to give you the objection. And, you know, again, you want to be perfectly nice to the person. There's a chance that you set it back up, but at the very least, you're going to get the information as to why they did. You're going to get a good read on why that appointment didn't go through, right? So this is how you can deal with it, you know, in the background. You guys hear me fine too, because it keeps saying my connection's unstable.
Yeah, you're all good on my side.
Okay.
You do break up a little bit, but then you come right back.
Okay, once we run into a major issue, then I'll switch over. I just don't want to switch over now, lose everything and have to get it all back up, you know? So that's what you can do after the fact. The two things that I would focus on though, while you're at the door, okay? If it's lack of interest or lack of spouse interest or not dealing with the objections at the door is if you see that, that a customer seems iffy on a lead. Now, what are the signs of that? If they're just answering yes to all of your questions, right? They're not giving you any other context at all or whatever, anything at all. If you notice something like that, that's a sign that they're not paying attention. And so they're not giving you the objections that they want to give you. Now, the way that you can handle something like that is the same way I would handle something like a lack of interest due to spouse or whatever, is I would add steps into my scripting before I set up the appointment. So remind the customer of what they're getting, give them a chance to object if they're not objecting. And I know that can be an iffy thing because why give them the opportunity to say no? But if it's a good appointment, then you're going to either A, be able to get over it, no problem, or B, they're not going to give you any issues at all anyways. So the thing that I like to add in there is right before I get on the phone with the office, it's a simple thing. When you think about it, it solidifies the appointment too, because you're not committing the customer to anything more than you've already talked about. So what I would say to that customer is, you know, Mr. Jones, before I get the office on the phone to schedule this appointment, I just want to remind you of what we're doing for you. Okay. Now that kind of language is important, what we are doing for you. Okay. I'm just going to make a note of that here. Okay, what we're going to examine all of the windows. Okay, so you're kind of going through the see which ones are the worst, which ones are giving you the biggest issues. We're going to leave you with that report, and we're also going to most importantly leave you with a no obligation. Now I'm going to get the office on the phone. We'll just take a second. Okay. You know, you might even so if you could just check your schedule. Okay, think about your schedule. I'm going to get the office on the phone right now. Let's just take a second. By adding that extra in, it's gonna
Hey, Paul, you're lagging out pretty bad, man. I can barely understand what you're saying.
Just keep it here just in case.
all right, guys. That cut out. Sorry. Now, Andrew just gave me his Wi-Fi, so I'm just going to use that. We shouldn't have the problem again. I just wanted to wait until we had the issue to switch over. Hoping that we didn't get the issue at all. Can you guys hear me fine up?
Now it's good, yeah.
All right, good.
Loud and clear.
All right, good. All right, excellent. So yeah, so if you add that into your scripting, that can help. With spouse lack of interest, I would heavily remind the person that you're talking to that they have to sell this to their spouse. Now, how do you do that? Okay. Just going to put a note here, selling to the spouse when they are not there. Now, what I'm going to do as well too, is like, this is not going to be the final thing here. I'm going to go through, you know, hopefully right after this, depending on when we get done, and kind of make another video with just this a little bit more streamlined, because I'm kind of typing notes quick and we're trying to get through as many issues that we can get through. Right. So, the way that you would sell to the spouse when they're not there, you want to remind the person that you're talking to essentially that it's important to have their spouse there. Now, the way to do this, I'm going to give you some ideas on this, and some other people might have some different ideas as well. I know that up there north, when it comes to getting the customer on the phone, Dalton was going through his scripting before. I don't know if he's up there right now with these guys up there, but right before he gets on the phone, like the whole thing about what we're going to do for you, he does a really good job with that as well. So is Dalton up there by chance, guys?
No, he's not.
Okay. And I'm sure a lot of you guys do the same thing with that too. So maybe we can go through that here in a minute. So when I'm trying to sell to the spouse through the person I'm talking to, I constantly bring them up as an important person, right? So it doesn't just stop with, hey, we need both owners of the property home for the appointment. Who would that be? They say their spouse, whatever. Every time that I bring them up, box one, we do set aside at least 90 minutes for you and Mrs. Jones. Okay. Right when I get on the phone, Mr. Jones, I just want to remind you what we're going to do for both you and Mrs. Jones when we come out to visit. Okay. When I'm bringing up the promotions, okay. What's really great about us coming to see you now, while we're already in the neighborhood, is I have a couple things for you. First, we're offering X, Y, and Z. Second, I have a $500 gift card. This is very important. Please make sure you show this to Mrs. Jones. I don't want her to be surprised. Okay. So, you're the constant reminder of you have to go through this with your wife. You have to let your wife know, or your husband know. Is important. One thing we used to do is we used to give people appointment reminders. The reason why we got rid of those is because they were these big pieces of paper. And right now with the iPads, it'd be a lot more difficult. Back then we had clipboards, so they just fit right in the clipboards. Now you'd have to fold them up and put them in your pocket. It wouldn't be very good. It wouldn't look very professional giving the customer. Now, one thing that we are going to do though, is when we reorder the $500 gift cards, we're going to put a big blank spot on the back like we used to do before, where you can sign it and date it. That way the customer has a reminder of that appointment. And you'd be surprised at the amount of attention that draws to the back of that card, where there is a phone number, yes, to cancel, but also if we do our job the right way, then they're not going to have to use that phone number. And it's going to be a constant reminder of the appointments. Just put that right on your refrigerator. Okay. You remind them specifically how to put this in their schedule. So you might say, Mr. Jones, if you don't mind, before I go, if you could just stick that in your phone or however you do your schedule, just to make sure that you don't forget about the appointment, right? Something like that, especially if it's set out a couple days. The biggest thing though is I think what Andrew brought up, which is not dealing with objections at the door. When a customer is giving you objections, with the way our scripting system is designed, the dangerous part about it is that it is smooth. It runs smoothly. It's a smoothly running system. So because of that, it doesn't take a lot of commitment from the customer in order to schedule an appointment with us. So for example, a lot of offices have to use a corporate call center. Well, by the time you get through the corporate call center, that person's got to be interested, because if they just sat through the 40 minutes that takes or whatever, it's obviously not 40 minutes literally, but whatever it takes, if they just sat through that ridiculous mess, then they're going to be a good customer, right? We don't have that. We have a very defined and, quick, easy system. And so because of that, you almost have to be wary of customers and they're not giving you a lot of fight back or a lot of information. Well, when a customer gives you an objection, because a lot of our system is based on just skipping the objection and moving on in the script, you have to make sure that's still not in the customer's mind. That's why questions like, does that sound helpful, are so important, because they're going to bring up the issues that the customer might be experiencing, right? Now, obviously you're doing that. You're saying, does that sound helpful? I'm sure. Sorry, we're getting a call from Fox probably downstairs.
I'll be right
Fox.
What's that?
Is that Brandon Fox?
No, somebody downstairs.
Yeah, I have him downstairs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, okay. Cool.
That didn't sound like you, Fox.
Yeah, he's down there right now. Yeah. So Anthony, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does actually.
Now, a lot of it, again, I mean, we could go through, in the longer form training, we could go through like specific rebuttals, stuff like that. I think the thing that's going to be best for you is if you go and pull those, like, think about this, right? If I have an issue, yesterday I was talking to Jess about an issue that she was having in events, and I'm like, okay, well, what would you write down? How would you do this, right? If I have a problem in the department, let's say with recruiting, or let's say people are not responding to recruiting ads or whatever, any issue, we have a big cancellation rate problem, not home rate problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to define what the problem is, what my goal is. So I might say, well, the problem is that not homes are 10% of our appointments. What is my goal? To get that down to 5%. What are some of the reasons that this can happen within our control, and then outside of our control? And then I'm going to go, okay, well, what can I do to fix these problems? So I'm going to do the research for it, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is, in order to get why these problems are happening, I need to probably define what not home is. If I have reps that are going to the door and there's a customer home, but they're saying no, not interested right away and closing the door in their face, well, then that's not a not home. That's a no demo. Okay. And that's a separate issue, because there's a chance a rep might be able to push into that house, not literally, obviously, figuratively, to get into that appointment. So what I would say is the best thing you can do is really dig into the appointments, call them and then see what the issue is. And you might be surprised at how clear of an answer you get from the customer. Okay. What else do we have for Anthony on that issue?
So
Mm-mm.
with the notes section, like my notes, I feel like for some people are like very just like simple. Like they feel the drafts and then that's it. Like that's like the only problem they have. And like I don't know what else to put.
Well, I'm glad that actually it's funny because you brought that up and it's a separate issue. But I'm going to touch on it briefly now because it's an easy one to answer. And I think it goes actually to what Anthony's going through right now. It maybe inadvertently that would solve part of the problem. Something that wasn't brought up is the notes, so the notes on a lead are important. So how to get proper notes. Now, sometimes you're just going to have customers that's the way it is. And you don't want to BS the notes. Obviously, you want to have honest answers in the notes. So what I would do, first thing is, think about the conversation that you're having. Is it really just drafts that are coming up? Maybe something else that's coming up is maybe it's a specific area in the house. Maybe they had a dog that just kept barking that was causing you to not be able to have a full conversation. Customer seems interested, but the dog kept barking, so I couldn't get deep into window problems. Like that's the kind of stuff that can go into notes as well. One of the most common things I see in people that have a high sales close rate with their notes is that they're very specific in where the issues are happening. So you'll notice that people that have a lower cancellation rate, a lot of their notes identify exactly what windows we're going to look at. So we're coming out to look at the two front bottom windows. Okay. Yeah, the two front rear windows. Find that. Write that in the notes. See if the rep can find it. The two front rear windows. The two front bottom windows, double hungs. That's where they're experiencing the most drafts. The more notes you have, the better an appointment is, not because of the words that you're putting down, but because of the fact that you've had to have the conversation with the customer. So if you make it practice to focus on the second half of your script, we talk a lot about, and this kind of goes into the window problems for you, Brady, as well. So kind of solves a little bit more of that too. There's two parts of the script where we can focus on window problems. One is in the beginning of the script. The other one is after we're scheduling the appointment. I put a lot more emphasis after we're scheduling the appointment. So in the beginning, I'm going to bring up what I see and the easy things that the customer has to agree on. After I get through the appointment and I'm going to schedule the appointment, when I'm going through my iPad, that's when I'm going through and asking more yes or no questions, asking more questions in general. And that's when I'm going and I'm identifying where the issues are happening, what kind of windows we're coming to see, everything like that. I'm trying to get a good full group of notes for the rep at the end of that appointment, instead of focusing on it in the beginning where there's more ability for it to kind of screw me up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
Good. And Anthony, that can help you too, because that cancellation rate has a lot to do with that. The call center will rebuttal more if they see more notes because they have more to go off of. So if the customer calls in to kill the appointment and they see that they have, drafts, front three windows, whatever, they're going to do something like, for example, downsize the job. What I mean by that is, well, sir, it is just three windows that you want to look at. It is a no obligation, completely free quote. It wouldn't be any problem at all for us to come stop out. There might be a better time for you. Mornings or afternoons be better. So they'll be able to rebuttal based on the notes that you have too, which does make it better for your appointments to go through. Does anybody else have anything to add to that specific problem? And that is this one right here. I would love for input from some people too. If anybody has anything to add, just don't hold back. If you have experience with this, if you had a problem with cancellation rate and whatnot, and now it's not as bad, this is a good one for you to answer. I know we got a lot of people that are newer on this call, but maybe there's something that you've observed up there, some successes that you've had, something like that. Okay. All right, well, let's go through the next one then. Right. And at any point in time, if anybody has anything to add, again, I'd rather not do the entire training. I'm happy to answer. Obviously, I have a lot of experience. I'm happy to go through everything. But I want people to give their input as well if you have input. All right.
Paul.
So go ahead.
So the only thing I was gonna say is just kind of like the same, like touch on it again with the notes, and just kind of see if it was a good idea. So I don't know if it was like Michael up here or Andrew in training. Somebody said like kind of do the same thing about being real specific, but like also continuing to like mention those problems as you're going through the script, right? So like just kind of keep assuring them that like those front three windows or Like a big one was like the other day we had a lady who she has a son and then she was expecting another one. So like a security thing for the kids' rooms and like making sure the kids were comfortable and like just keep kind of pressing that and being very specific and like why we're coming out. So like, would that be the same thing? Like, do you think that would help as well? Like just kind of
Yeah.
also in the notes, that way the call center can rebuttal, but then like kind of use that as a rebuttal yourself, but just like keep pressing that issue of like, no, you definitely want this for XYZ.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's actually a great point. And this is why the roundtable thing is so important, because that's something I didn't even think about. This speaks, so there's a couple of reasons why this is important. Window problems, it's important with. It's the same thing that I say about when a customer tells you that they're too busy, for example, and they don't have time to talk to you. Same thing. If you keep bringing up the problem, it gives them less incentive to say no. You're dealing with the objection, whether it's an objection, an answer to an objection, or it's a window problem, then they're more likely it's going to get stuck in their head that they have that issue. So for example, in the value of the visit, you might say, Mr. Jones, what we'll do is have somebody come out, they'll inspect all these windows, especially these 3 that you were having the drafting issue with, right? Or they'll inspect all the windows for you, sir. They'll see if there's any more with security concerns, like your daughter's room that you mentioned up there, right? And so, you're continuing to bring this up as an issue. It is important, absolutely. And you can do this with other things too. So for example, if you go to introduce yourself and the person goes, look, I got to get dinner and I don't have time for this, right? Then you would just simply say something like, okay, well, I promise I'll make this quick. And then you start to go into your script. And then, when you say something like that, I'll be out of, so let's say that you say something like, now I want to point out a couple issues that you're having here, ma'am. Instead of just saying that, you'd say, no, ma'am, I'll be quick about this, but I did want to point out a couple issues that you're having. I noticed X, Y, and Z. And just to make this quick, Mrs. Jones, may I make a suggestion? And the fact that you keep bringing that up again is gonna buy you time. Essentially, the customer doesn't have to tell you, no, I don't have time for this, because you're already putting that in front of you. If they brought it up, of course, you don't want to bring that up if you don't have to. But yeah, that's a good point for multiple different reasons. And window problems are the same way. Very good point. Anything else on that? Okay, so let's talk about dealing with these sensitive issues. Okay, so that could be someone is sick in the house. That could be there's a financial issue. That could be there's a divorce issue, death in the family. All these things are difficult to deal with. Now, I would never tell anybody, especially when it comes to death in the family and somebody being very sick, that you have to push the person. Okay, like when I was talking to Fox about this person earlier that he was on a callback with, my thing was like, look, here's a way that you can do it. Right now, I don't see why you wouldn't do it as long as you are good about it and tactful with it. Like, you don't want to come off as disrespectful, and quite frankly, you shouldn't want to feel like a crappy person because the way that you go about doing something, right? And you don't have to. Keep in mind, like, what you're there to do. You're not forcing anyone to buy anything. It's not like someone, just lost their job and you're like, hey, no, you have to pay me 20 grand, right? So it's not, just be square on what you're doing is the first thing, is understand that, like, you're just offering a free service to the person, and ultimately they can say no if they want to. But I'll give you an example. I had a guy in the neighborhood next door here who he told me, he said, my wife just passed away a couple of weeks ago, right? So I said, well, sir, I'm sorry. That's going to be very difficult. How long were you guys together? And we talked for a little bit about their marriage, and it was a good conversation, And he was emotional about it, but it was a good conversation. I said, well, sir, obviously I'm not going to, you need windows, right? But I'm not going to focus on that with you right now. Obviously you're grieving, and I wouldn't want to get in the way of that. So I'll tell you what I can do is I can have somebody come out at a better time next week. They can speak with you, go through the different options, and leave you with a quote if that would be a better time for you. So it was very much like not demanding, but again, I'm doing my best customer service wise to set this person up. So I'm still scheduling them for an appointment, but the face I'm giving them is, look, sir, I'm going to do this next week because obviously right now you can't deal with this, right? Now there's a good chance that the person says, I'm not going to be ready next week either. And then, okay, if it's a death in the family, like a very close person, then I would just go, okay, well, we'll give you a call back, right? I'm not going to continue to press the person on that. But there's also a good chance that they go, okay, I appreciate it. Yeah, have somebody come by next week, right? If let's say someone is sick, like a situation like Fox was dealing with specifically, this person is like, I can't do the schedule because we have appointments all next week or all the next 2 weeks, then the way that I would put it is, okay, well, I definitely don't want to get in the way of that. Obviously, that's the most important thing. And I'm sorry, by the way, it's going to be extremely difficult what you're doing. And start the conversation that way. That being said, we are in your neighborhood right now. And so that's why I'd want somebody to stop by, but I can assure you, we can be very respectful of your time. We'll make sure that we work out whatever time you need. What time is usually best? Is it like evening best considering your appointments? Something like that, right? My guess is Mrs. Jones, the best time to meet you then would probably be in the evening around like 7 o'clock, 6:30, when you're not going to have doctor's appointments, right? Something like that would be the way to deal with it, because again, you're setting yourself up for success in this way. You're saying, look, I am considerate to your situation. I apologize, but hey, I want to make sure we do this for you because we're already in your neighborhood. But I promise you, because of what you're going through, I can get you basically anytime that you want. Now, by doing that, again, you're offering a deeper service to this person. What you're signaling to them is, instead of us forcing you to do it tomorrow, we can do this anytime that you want in the next week, because we're going to be out here anyways, right? Now, is it perfect? No, I mean, you're going to have some people that are just like, no, I don't want to do that. And fine. I mean, those are people that you're probably not going to push that hard, right? I wouldn't. Okay. I try to motivate them to do it, sure, but I'm going to do what I'm comfortable with, right? Which is not push very hard on people like that. And that's why I wouldn't ask anybody to do that. Now, if the person has COVID, you don't want us coming out right then, but schedule it for a week out. I mean, stuff like that is stuff that, or 5 days out, stuff like that is stuff that is, I'm talking about, someone's in the hospital or in hospice care, stuff like that. Their spouses, I dealt with a guy, we were setting a guy with, he was on dialysis and he was a young guy, terrible situation, but he needed new windows and he knew it. So again, it was, okay, well, let's schedule around these dialysis appointments. If the second he brought that up, I had just left and said, okay, well, sir, I don't want to bug you, then I would have been out of the appointment, but he would have been out of windows as well, because he did end up buying windows. Okay. So it's just, think about it. And no matter what company they go with, they're going to have to spend this kind of time on this specific thing, especially if they want quality windows. And what kind of person are you if you walk away and let them make a decision to buy some window that they're going to have to replace in a couple of years, especially if they're elderly, right? Now, there's some situations that I wouldn't touch. I remember going into a house where I've told this story before, but I walk into the house and there's a bunch of memorial pins, like when somebody dies, and they have like the pins made for them. And I said, ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, who's that? And she says, well, that's my son. And I said, oh my God, I'm sorry, what happened? And she says, well, he was a police officer in Philadelphia and he was just killed last week. And she started to cry, and I said, and this was when I was in King of Prussia. And I said, ma'am, that's terrible. I mean, I'm glad I knocked on your door, because I'm glad I get to hear about your son, but I'm so sorry that you're going through that. That's terrible. And her husband comes out because he's hearing his wife cry, and he starts to cry too. And it was a difficult situation. I'm a very emotional person. I started crying eventually too. They brought me over to show me, like, they had like a thing set up for him with like his badge and his hat in there and all this stuff. Like I don't want to call it a shrine, but like memorial they were making for their son in their house. And it was a touching situation, and I didn't set them then. I didn't even talk about it. I said, look, we're not going to go through this right now. Why don't I give you folks a call back when you're more comfortable? Again, not that you're ever going to be comfortable with this, but when you're a little bit deeper into this process. And they said, fine. They did end up buying windows eventually, but it was like 6 months later, understandably. So it's like, there's certain lines that you don't want to cross. But it shouldn't stop you from having a conversation with the person. And you never know what could come of that situation or the conversation. They could have said something like, what? Yeah, this is terrible that we're going through this, but we definitely were interested in buying windows. So if you could just come out next week after the funeral. Now, they didn't say that, and I'm kind of glad they didn't, because it would make them seem pretty cold. But you just never know. But if you cut the conversation off right when the person brings it up, then there's no chance that you set up the appointment at all. And by the way, too, that you can get some really interesting and cool stories from people, and sometimes sad, but very, like, I'm happy I met those people. I will forever remember them. There's never going to be a time where I don't remember those people whose son passed away as a cop in Philadelphia, was gunned down. I'll never forget those people ever, and so there's some interesting situations and conversations that you end up having because of stuff like this too. So just, think about that as you're trying to work through these appointments, right? Anybody else have any other suggestions for that? Does that answer your question, Jonathan? You muted yourself. You were unmuting.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely did. It was we had a situation like that, not with like their son, but like the lady was like she came to the door and she was all happy and like she was like pushing to like get the windows. Like she was like almost like excited about it. And then like whenever we told her like that her and her husband would have to be there, she was like, oh well, we're going like we're separating. So like, do you know what I mean? And like I didn't know, like, do you just kind of skip over that and then just keep pushing for the windows? Like I personally I didn't. So that was, you know, that was one of like the first doors I did on my own. So like I didn't really know what to do exactly. But
Yeah, it's a difficult situation to deal with right in the beginning. So it's tough because if they own the house together, then they would technically have to be there. So that's what makes a situation like that difficult. So I think that the best way to handle that is to, you don't want to ask too many questions, but to say, okay, well, this is typically a decision because we want to make sure that everybody's happy with the decision and stuff like that. It's typically a decision that's made, if there's two people out on the property with those two people, do you own the home, man? Just ask a question like that. No, we own it together. All right, well, I'll tell you what, I don't want to bog you down with more stuff right now. Anyways, how about I give you a call back in a couple weeks and check on the status of the home and whatnot. Something like that. It depends on what they say, of course, but if the person says, no way, yeah, we're separated and it's just me that owns a home, well, then you could just schedule them for the appointment, no problem. Makes sense?
yeah.
It's a difficult situation though, and it will come up. Obviously, the divorce rate in this country is pretty high. And so it's not gonna get we're not gonna get less of that probably over the next couple of years. So it's definitely an important thing to know how to handle for sure. All right, the people that put their questions in the chat, the issue is that it deleted it whenever the internet went out. So could you guys please either say them or put them in the chat again? While you're doing that too. So far, we talked about the window problems and, kind of how much is too much. We mentioned that one of the most important things that you have two parts of that conversation so you can use them either way. Definitely you want to make sure that by the time you get done the appointment, your notes are accurate, but that they are detailed. And then we talked about cancellations and kind of how to deal with those, both cancellations from the perspective of like the customers we're getting a hold of the customers and ones that are that don't have two phone numbers, stuff like that, that's non-confirming. We talked about making sure that how we would deal with people in difficult situations, people that are sick, being sensitive to difficult situations. And you want to be a person with that stuff too, right? That's the biggest thing. So for you guys that had the questions that were in the chat, could you guys retype those please, or just say them?
One of the problems I ran into yesterday was I ran into a lot of old Andersons that were about 25 years old, and a lot of them were starting to warp and have like cracks on the side. And I guess when I was trying to convince them of drafts and everything that they might have, I wasn't convincing enough. How would you convey stuff like that?
Okay, good. I'm glad that you brought that up because a lot of people have struggled with Andersen windows. As a matter of fact, down in Central, our sales reps struggle with Andersen windows sometimes. You see it in their notes where they go up to 20-year-old windows and they're like, oh, they're fine. So there's two ways to approach Andersen windows. I mean, you definitely want to take stock of the window problems, but when you see Andersen 400 series, which is the classic, it's got the 1-inch strip of vinyl all around it and stuff like that, like the typical Andersen that you see out there. When you see that, immediately what I do, okay, is my purpose for being there changes, okay? So I make their windows the reason you are there. So, what I mean by that is that you'd say something like, Mrs. Jones, good afternoon, my name is Paul Duffy, Mrs. Jones. Hi, Mr. Jones. I'm with Renewal by Andersen. I wanted to come up and visit you because I noticed you had the Andersen windows here. We were doing a job for your neighbor right down the street, or we were just checking out some Andersen windows for your neighbor right down the street that we had finished up, and I wanted to stop by because I noticed that you had the original Andersens here. Make that the reason why you're there. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm here because you have Andersen windows, right? And then you want to point out the window problems, but I don't think there's a problem with asking the person at that point, well, of course, how long have you lived in the home? Okay. And then because if they had the house built with Andersens, okay, great. So you chose the Andersens in here, or, if they didn't, well, you really lucked out, Mrs. Jones, because this is a great home with really great windows. That being said, they are a little bit outdated. But how do you enjoy the windows overall? Now you might go, well, that's a dangerous question to ask the person how they like their windows, because, that's not going to contribute to the window problems. And you could be right, but the idea is getting that person sold on the product. Now, what I mean by that is that the way I like to deal with Andersen window customers is the reason why I'm out there is because you have a good window, but it's been upgraded, it's out of warranty, and you're going to start to have problems with it, right? So that's the way that I kind of deal with those customers. So the way that I would bring that up is I go, specifically I go, okay, well, Mrs. Jones, a couple of things. I'm glad that you enjoy your windows. That's good. And you should. I mean, Andersen windows last for a long time. They have one of the best warranties in the business. That being said, these are about 5 years out of warranty. And here's the reason why. And then I would start to point out the problems. One of the things that Andersen windows has changed over the years is their material. So the material that you have here right now, it's starting to wear down, and you can actually see the wood underneath the vinyl on the windows here. That's a major issue. That would never happen to our material now, which is a composite material between wood and vinyl. Okay, another thing I want to point out is that the sill on your window here is starting to rot. That happens with older Andersen windows like this. That would never happen with a newer Andersen window. Even as little as the screens, Mrs. Jones, what I noticed first whenever I walk into a house like this is, the windows, that they're Andersens, of course, but that the screens are all missing. Okay. Now, do you know why that is, Mrs. Jones? No, I have no idea. Or if they've lived there for a long time, yeah, we took them off because they're annoying. Okay. They might not even know. They might think that's the way screens are supposed to go. Well, Mrs. Jones, back when these were built, Andersen windows had a fixed screen, and they're very inconvenient. So most people with Andersen windows that are this age, they take their screens out, never put them back in. Our screen now is virtually invisible, and we allow options to allow you to open and close your screen, so you're never going to have to deal with screens like this ever again, right? So even something as small as that, you're telling them the difference. Now, here's the thing versus vinyl. With vinyl, you're not going through all those differences. With an Andersen customer that's more, potentially more interested in our product, or at least knows a little bit more about our company, or feels like they do, that's a safe place to go. Okay, does that make sense? And there's more too, but does that make sense so far?
A little bit, yeah. I had a lot of people who were really not really the nicest people yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to really talk to many people. Like you were saying earlier, second I went to go say, hey, my name is Charles, I'm with Andersen. They slammed the door right away, didn't give me a chance to talk. And some of them were saying Verizon was in the area, so a lot of them had a little, I guess they thought I was Verizon as well. So that's another
Yeah, I mean,
problem.
that's a whole separate issue though, right? That's not the question he asked me. The question he asked me was about Andersen windows. That has nothing to do with Andersen windows. So does this make sense to Andersen windows? Because that's a whole separate thing that we can deal with too.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my question is here's the thing that you don't want to fall into. This is what people constantly fall into when they first start is potentially and it's all about how it's dealt with management and how we go about addressing the issues. But like when you think about it, you brought up, oh, I have this significant thing that definitely affected my performance. Great, it's something answerable, something that we can deal with. And as soon as you get the answer for it, well, everybody was slamming the door in my face, so it doesn't really matter. Well, the Andersen window problem can't be the issue if that's the issue. Does that make sense? Like one of the two has to be the issue. The question is, does this solve that first problem? And I'm not done with it yet, but so far, based on the Andersen windows, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And we can go over how to get over those kind of people in a second too, which we'll address in 1 second. So after I go through the window problems like that, my value of the visit actually changes a bit too. So I'm going to ask them, Mr. Jones, because you have the Andersen windows, may I make a suggestion, right? Now, of course, they're going to say yes. They might say no, but yes. They might say, I'm not going to do anything with my windows, but yeah, sure you can. Or my windows are fine, but yeah, sure you can. And then what I'm going to say is, because you're an Andersen customer, what I'll do, hold on, Fox is calling the office phone. There's nobody in here. Hey, I'll send Andrew down in a second. No problem. Next time, just interrupt me on training. There's nobody else in there except me. Yeah, sounds good. I'll set them down in a minute. All right, thank you. Okay. So what I'd say for the value of the visit, I say, because you're an Andersen customer, or because you have the Andersen windows here, what I do is have somebody come out. They could check the energy efficiency of these windows, and because they're Andersens, they could see what kind of problems they may or may not be having. They could see how they're holding up, and if they're fine, great. But if they're not, we can show you the differences between the Andersen windows that we have now and the Andersen windows that we had before. And then we can leave you with some free information and a free price quote. So if you ever have to replace them, you at least have the information set aside. Now, I'm sure that would be helpful while we're in the neighborhood, right? So do you see where I'm going with that? It's a lot easier for the customer to consume than, hey, you need to replace your windows. Does that make sense?
Yeah, honestly, it makes it a little bit easier. I'm probably going to use that next time I get through and talk to someone with Anderson.
Yeah, the biggest thing is because this is being recorded, we can go back and make scripting based on the video too. So that's the cool part about putting this stuff on YouTube, which I'll send out to the group me after this too, is that you can actually go back and write that stuff down, because I know I'm saying it quickly because we have a limited schedule here, but that's why I'm doing this. I'm going to make notes after too, but Anderson windows are something that I think some people struggle with a lot. Some people don't struggle with at all. And it goes even deeper than that too. So I say, does that sound helpful? Now think about it. If the customer says, not right now because the windows are fine, or if the customer says, yeah, but I don't have the time for this right now or whatever, I still have my second part of the goal to visit, So again, what I would say to that customer, just slightly different than the script, is I'd say, well, Mrs. Jones, because you have the Anderson windows already, all we would do is come out, go over your options, answer any questions that you have, and then leave you with a free price quote that's good for a year. So you can call us back whenever you want. Now, again, we're already in the neighborhood. I have your last name as Jones. What's your first, right? So you can utilize that second part of the value of the visit, but it's all about framing the whole thing about you have Anderson windows. That's why we're here, right? It's kind of like when we go to townhomes and we say to the customer, look, we just did some work in the HOA. So they have us come out to speak to the homeowners, and the homeowners are going, oh man, they did work with the HOA. This is great, right? So does that make sense?
Paul, I got a question.
Okay, sounds good. What's your question?
So, is it fair to just kind of go into like if they say, and this just not even for just Anderson windows, but just in general, so just kind of explain to them oh, that's exactly why I'm here, right? So if they're like, oh yeah, I'm not interested in doing anything right now, and just kind of telling them that's the whole point, right? We're not expecting you to right now. People kind of, whenever you tell them that's why you're there, for future planning purposes, just for me personally, where we were at, it seemed to work a lot better. Do you think that would be okay?
That's part of our scripting. So part of our advanced scripting that we wrote a couple of years back is to do exactly that. So there's two methods that I use when rebuttaling people. The first one is that. The first one is to make them feel at ease, to kill the objection, essentially, is to use that language. That way they don't feel comfortable bringing up the objection again. So if someone tells me I can't afford this right now, and I say, well, yeah, actually, I'm glad that you said that's exactly why I'm here. And then I go, of course, right into my value of the visit or whatever, that I'm killing the objection. They don't feel like they can bring it up again, right? The second way to deal with that, if something was to come up again, they were to object again, would be to redirect the customer. And it's the same kind of thing. All I'm saying to the customer, so I say, does that sound helpful? And the customer goes, it does. But I just, like I said, I really don't have the money right now. Look, we got 2 kids in college. Oh, well, Mr. Jones, I didn't know that. Now that you said that way, I'll tell you what we can do. We'll have somebody just come out and go over your options, answer any questions that you have, and then leave you with a quote that's good for a year. So you have the information set aside. So you see what I'm doing there? It's the same kind of thing. I'm redirecting. Oh, well, I'm glad that you said that. This is what we'll do that. And I make it sound like it's something different, right? Oh, well, because you said that, we're not going to try to sell your windows. We're going to do this instead, right? And I'm not saying those exact words, but that's what I'm making it seem like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So over time, when you start with the company, you learn these rebuttals and all this stuff. And that's very important because the underlying point is that, until you understand the customer, it's very difficult to utilize even something as simple as, well, that's exactly why I'm here. Because you can't be like, oh, well, that is exactly why I'm here. One of our foremen needs to see your windows. It has to be a feeling behind it, right? And so it's important to learn the script and rebuttals. But in advanced training, what we constantly go over is that those are the 2 ways to deal with objections beyond scripting. One is to kill the objection by using the language, that's exactly why I'm here, or I'm glad that you said that that's exactly why I'm here. And then the other one is to redirect the customer by letting them know, oh, okay, well, because you said that, Mr. Jones, we'll do this instead. So for example, again, may I make a suggestion? Well, look, I really can't afford windows right now because I just started a new job. Oh, well, Mr. Jones, because you said that, I'll tell you what we'll do instead is we'll just have a foreman come out just to see if we can even do what needs to be done here, find out what you like. And if we can't be a service to you, that's fine. We'll just recommend someone else who can. Right. So those are the 2 ways that I would deal with objections, definitely, from a macro perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. What else on the Anderson windows? Anything else on the Anderson windows? Any questions about that? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I got a question. What if they talk about they maintain them, maintain the windows?
Yeah, okay. So, the first question I would ask the person is, oh, okay, how do you do that? Right? That's the first question I would ask, right? Oh, okay, cool. What do you do to maintain the windows? Right. And now, because with Anderson windows, I mean, really all that can mean is that they clean them. I guess they could have replaced parts on them or whatever. But getting a good idea of what that means first is important. So if they say, oh yeah, well, I clean them and I replaced some of the locks. Okay, great. That's definitely a great way to deal with the windows. And I would suggest that, if you don't decide to replace the windows ever, then, keep doing that. It's obviously better than what most people do. I'll tell you what though, Mr. Jones, what I'll do then is just have somebody come out and show you the difference between, maintaining the windows and how much it would save you, to get them replaced, and then leave you with a free price quote that's good for a year. That way you have the information set aside. Make sense? So essentially what you're telling the customer is, just because you do this doesn't mean you can't do this. Or just because you do this doesn't mean that this is not important, right? It just, it makes it, a lot of these appointments, guys, you think about why a customer would schedule with us. One of the biggest things is it's an informational, they're getting free information. You ever notice when you schedule an appointment and you get a customer that is almost excited about the fact that it's free? Well, yeah, I figure I'll get the free quote. It's just, I mean, as long as it's free information, might as well just look into it, right? So a lot of this is selling free information, right? And so, with someone like that, that's like, no, I maintain my windows. They'll stay good for a while because I maintain them. A lot of it is selling the information. Well, let's check this out for you. Let's see what kind of problems you have. It's also another important thing to do would be to go after the problems that they can't maintain. So for example, on an Anderson window, if which is going to happen every time, if the vinyl is oxidizing and peeling off or powdering, there's no way to maintain that. You can't fix that. You can wash it off, but it's just like washing rust off metal, or washing rot off wood. It's the same exact thing, and I would make sure the customer knows that. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Anybody got anything else to add to that? Okay, so real quick before we move to the one in the chat, Charles, we'll go through your other question there, the other statement about how customers have been difficult or whatever, we're kind of in a bad mood. So the tough thing is yeah, other companies definitely do the job that we do, and a lot of them don't have the proper training to do it. And so the way that they do it, the way that they act out there is less than great, And so you'll run into companies that don't look professional, don't talk professional, don't act professional. One of the companies that the reason why Verizon and places like that can sometimes be a problem is because they don't actually hire people to do the jobs often. They outsource that to other companies. And actually, Cooksey used to work at a place that did this. In those companies, a lot of times the training is lackluster, and they focus on like hard sales tactics. They're collecting money at the door a lot of times, and so it's a little bit of a different job. And unfortunately, sometimes we run into people like that, or neighborhoods like that. The biggest thing is, the way I always look at it, is if you can break through in conversation, it's a huge strength to you because the difference that you can make. So for example, I remember getting an email a couple of years ago, and it was we had a couple of people that were out on break in a Dunkin' Donuts, and the email started off. I was nervous to read it because it started off. I was scared because I saw a bunch of your employees outside of a Dunkin' Donuts, and me and my girlfriend were walking, and I'm like, oh my God, what did one of these guys do? Like, this is awful, right? But then the customer, like, he was trying to play a joke on me. He was trying to like say like, but then your employees, this, that, the other thing. And he was like, usually work groups, people like that, where there's a bunch of them, they can be rude. They can take up a lot of space. Your staff, they held the door for me and my girlfriend when we had our hands full. Half of them waited outside that way until the other ones were done. That way they weren't clogging everything up. They let people go before them in line. And it made a huge difference. Next time I replace my windows, I'm definitely going to go with Renewal by Anderson. And so if we have the ability to make an impact on the customer positively, then we're going to, it's going to be a benefit to our business and what we do. So unfortunately, some customers aren't going to give you the opportunity to do that. They're going to slam the door in your face, stuff like that. That being said, that's only ever going to be a percentage of customers. Perception can really quick make it seem like it's more than it is. But the amount of customers that are literally going to just go, oh yeah, no, slam, it is minuscule percentage wise. Even if you're getting a few of those in a day, it shouldn't be a constant thing. If there is, then I don't know. We got to examine, how your hair's cut or something like that. I'm kidding, obviously, but I don't know I can't remember how your hair's cut. I'm kidding, but people typically, even like when I go to the door or something like that, if I'm wearing like my shorts and my sleeveless, polo or whatever, I'll have some old people that will answer the door. They'll look at my tattoos and they'll go to slam the door. Usually it's a minuscule amount of people, so it seems like a lot though. I'll give you an example. I was with this guy, Hassan, down in Hassan down in New Jersey canvassing, and we're in this neighborhood, and the neighborhood was mostly vinyl windows and some older wood windows that were rotting. And he says to me halfway through the day, he goes, man, all the people with older wood windows are not answering, right? And I thought about this statement. I'm like, why does it seem that way? It does seem that way. And what we came to thinking about this is, well, it seems that way because whenever we knock on a door and the person has brand new vinyl windows and they don't answer, we're not really thinking about it. But when the windows are rotting out of the house and the person doesn't answer, we're like, oh man, what the hell? We really think about what we could have done there and stuff like that. So it made it seem like it was a lot more people than it actually was that were not answering, that were, it's not like they're having an old Windows party, right? So it's only ever going to be a portion of the people. So what you do when the person answers the door, and they might give you a very small amount of time. The biggest thing I like to do is, if the customer is like, let's say they answer and I say, good afternoon, my name is Paul Duffy. And they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to be interested. And they go to start shutting the door. Then the first thing you can do is make a statement like, well, 1 second or something like that. Grab their attention. This is very important before I go, right? A simple thing, put your hand out, signifying to them, no, you got to wait, right? The biggest thing is buying yourself that couple extra seconds. That's what it is, Now, whether or not that works out, it doesn't mean that it's going to all the time. Well, I see your message there, Charles, too. Like I said, I can't see it. So, but that sounds good. People might be running away from my haircut too. That's he says that his haircut's like mine right now. Sounds good. But yeah, it's not, usually that's going to get you a little bit more time, right? A little bit more time. And it doesn't mean that it's going to solve the issues, but this is a job where in the beginning, when you're first, talking to the customer, it is measured in seconds. Can I get an extra 5 seconds from this person? Can I get an extra 10 seconds from this person? And what you'll find is, and I think a lot of people would attest this, in here, is that once you get that first lead of the day, you're going to realize that what felt like 5 seconds before is 30 seconds really. It really is about mindset and in the mindset that you're in. And it might not seem that way, but it definitely is. And I think a lot of people can attest to that. Anthony, you've been here for a little bit. You could attest to that. Brady, you've been here for a couple of weeks and, have written a good amount of leads. You could attest to that. I'm sure there's a bunch of other people on here that could attest to that as well. I guess, Anthony, let me get your take on that. What do you think about what I just said there? And, the idea that people are slamming the door in your face and how that can feel.
Oh yeah, it doesn't feel that great, honestly.
Can you write down his phone number for me, please? I'm on a Zoom training right now. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anthony.
I said it doesn't feel that great, honestly. But I just know it's part of the job. My thing is just like usually because it's like they don't know why we're knocking on the door. My favorite part is like when they actually just open the door before I even get a chance to knock on it. It's like like they're looking out the window, I guess, waiting for me to come knock, and they just hop out real quick, trying to like, oh, not interested or whatever. But yeah, it doesn't feel the greatest. But then sometimes
it's not meant to, right? I mean,
oh no, of course not. But now then I have the mindset like, okay, I'll just go set your neighbor now, I guess. But but I also know like sometimes like when they do like open the door, like they're not interested, like, oh, Anderson, yeah, I'm good or something like that. Like, what is the best way to counteract that? Like, oh, Anderson, oh yeah, I'm not like, no, I'm good with that.
So the biggest thing to remember, right? And I always lead this off with this because what ends up happening is like, if we go over something like about this stuff in training, people expect it to work, obviously, because we're going over it in training and it doesn't work 99% of the time. But that's okay because we're looking for those margins, right? When you're dealing with customers like that, there's no like easy way to deal with it. And most people are still going to be not interested people, right? But with that caveat there, I think the best way to deal with somebody like that is to change the subject briefly and then get back to it. So the way that I would do something like that is, okay, well, that's not why I'm here. So I'll let you know why I'm here. We were just finishing up a job for your neighbor right down the street. And I wanted to stop by. I had a question for you. How long have you lived in the home? And again, it's about prompting a little bit more conversation because, once they answer that question about how long they've lived in the home, that can lead to a lot of deeper conversations. If they say, well, I just bought the house. Well, the reason why they're probably saying they don't want windows right now, I wouldn't say this, but they'll say it for you, is, well, I just bought the house. I don't want to buy new windows, right? Well, that gets you a lot deeper than, oh, Anderson, no, I'm good, right? So you'll find out a lot in that first 30 seconds. When you ask the question, how long have you lived in the home? They say, oh, well, I built it 30 years ago. Well, what I can tell you is probably, and I wouldn't bring it up again to the customer, but I'd force conversation to make it come up, is they probably felt like, well, I did the work on the house, I'll just keep doing that. Or I was here when the windows were installed, so I understand the windows, right? And so a lot of times that teasing out that conversation is the best way to be able to get those leads, again, on the margins, right? So the way I look at it is like this: I go, okay, well, if let's say that I am John Smith and I'm getting 5 leads a day, I probably don't have a lot of leads in the margins. What I'm probably going to do is, sure, I'll focus in the margins. If I got 1 or 2 a week there, great. But I'm going to focus more on the cancellation rate and how I can make my leads better. But if I'm in the 2 or 3 leads per day, then my margins are pretty wide. I can find more leads out there that I'm not finding currently. And that's when I'm going to really focus in those margins. Okay. If I can get that 3 people per week that led off with, oh, Anderson, no, I'm good, to set up an appointment, that's great. That's great, right? If I can get those couple people that were, they were about to slam the door and I stopped them for 2 seconds. If I can get that 1 person per week to schedule, then that's in the margins, right? So you're expanding the amount of people that you can deal with. And eventually that will get you to the 4 or 5 leads a day instead of, 2 or 3 leads a day. And it'll be a great feeling when it happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, perfect. All right. So let's get to some. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, actually, I do have another question. Because you mentioned about I like someone who built their house or whatever, so they do their own work. How do you counteract those people, and also contractors, or I know someone who can do it.
It's funny that you say that, because the first question in chat that I was about to go to is this one: issues with setting people who do their own work or have a close family friend that can do it. You explain the service, but they just aren't interested. So it fits with both. This kind of fits to that, right? I don't know if you didn't write this, because iPhone wrote this. Whose iPhone?
It's your boy.
Oh, that's echoing big time. Who's your boy?
I'm sorry. It's Derek.
Okay. That echo, man, I can't tell it's your voice. Usually I can tell right away.
Dude, I don't know what's going on.
You in a tunnel? In a tube? Are you going tubing? No, we're not going to go down that path.
Scared to respond.
All right. So let's just, Seth just joined. Seth, what do you have to say about this one? Setting people who do their own work, have close family friends that can do it, or people that say that they're going to do it themselves, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a good one. You run into a lot with a lot of DIYs these days. In certain areas, you just have people who everyone knows somebody who's a contractor. What I really like to do is kind of leverage that, and I cater to them, and I tell them, well, then that's perfect. You know exactly what I'm talking about then when it comes to the problems that I'm pointing out, and they agree with you. 99.9% of the time, they're like, yeah, I know it's, something that I need to get done. I kind of make a joke of, a painter's house is the last one to get painted, right? You have all these. I used to do landscaping for 12 years. My yard looked terrible, because I do it all day, and I just get tired of doing it when I got home. So in the same way, you're like, that's awesome. You're my favorite. I always leverage again that he knows what he's talking about. So you're my favorite person actually to talk to. What I do know is that whenever you're ready to address this project, we have a great rebuttal for this, by the way, on the 3rd page of the script. Basically, we have something proprietary to us that you can only get through us. And you're gonna have something really unique to compare to. And we find a good time for you. I just roll right into the script. Please pick our guy's brain at your leisure. You don't see this at Lowe's, you don't see this at Home Depot, and you move on to whatever part of the script you're at. And if that's the value, then awesome. If it's scheduling, whatever, but you cater to their experience, and then you tell them, exactly what makes us special and why they wouldn't be able to get this anywhere else.
Okay, good. 1 second. All right, sorry about that. It's like it's an oddly busy Saturday, which I thought, okay, cool, we'll have this will not happen because it's Saturday, great. So I think that's a good answer. I mean, I really don't have much to add to that. I think that that we talked about this earlier, but you know, you're the way you set this, starting that out, the whole exactly why I'm here thing. Again, I'm glad that you said that. That's kind of you know what we were talking about earlier, Jonathan. You brought it up at the door. Killing those objections. You know, I'm glad that you said that. That's why I'm here. You're the perfect person to talk to. Happy I'm talking to you. You know, it's going to throw them off a bit. That's not what they expect to hear, right? They expect you to go, oh, okay, sir. You know, so that's a good thing. And then I think that generally we talked about having control of the reason for the appointment. You know, so if you're talking to an Anderson Window customer, for example, you have control over the reason why they would have somebody come up, right? And this is the same exact thing. You know, this is the reason why we're here. This is why we do our job. I'm glad we spoke to you. This is why we do our job, right? So I think that's the best way to move with that. Ultimately, you know, when it comes down to it, you're going to have a system. I think everybody in their head should have a system of the things that they're going to go through before they leave the house. So, you know, you start off with something like that. That is the best chance for you to win, the best chance for you to get the appointment. And then you go to the next thing down. If that doesn't work out, then you're going to talk maybe about, you know, the difference in our product and specifically why it would be better for their home. It's custom made, so on and so forth. You know, then from there you might go to, you know, well, right, we're already out in your neighborhood and we have these promotions going on. It's the only place that you're going to get financing, you know, options right now at a reasonable rate, whatever. Like, and I'm not saying that those specific things are exactly what you go through, but you should have a system in your head where you're going, this first thing, this is my best option, but I'm going to go through all these other things too. And that's why rebuttals are so important. That's why having this system that is so important. You should have a system for every objection where, you know, you're not leaving that house until you get through all of these different things. And all of those things should lead back to your script and back to you closing up the appointment. And that's the way that you're going to expand the amount of appointments that you set. You know, does that make sense? Any questions at all about that?
No, that makes sense.
I had just one quick statement on that, if I could. It's a really powerful one that you just touched on, which is that you might make that association for contractors of like, oh, well, never mind, I'm kind of wasting my time. But if you get better at navigating conversations with contractors, people who say they can't afford it, et cetera, you know, in your head, you might not be doing this overtly, but you're having these mental calculations of, oh, this conversation's going really well. Oh, I'm about to set this appointment, right? You can feel that traction and it's kind of building and you're like, hey, can I make my suggestion? They're like, yeah. And you're like, awesome. Love that someone stop out, you know, and you're thrumming. And then other times someone says, I'm a contractor. You're wasting your time, buddy. And immediately your internal calculations are like, oh, I'm at 2% of setting this lead, right? This isn't happening. Just being better at navigating some of these really common objections that everyone's heard can change that 2% to a 10%. And are you going to book 100% of the contractors? No, but improving your chances and being better at navigating these objections is going to convert one more a day, which is huge, or, you know, a couple more a week. And then you improve on every different facet of objections that people are throwing at you. And that's when you start running into the 12, 13, 14 demo weeks, because no matter what, you're improving your odds of setting those leads by refining that craft.
Yeah, like we were just talking about, guys, you know, winning the margins is really important. And eventually you get to the point where those margins are so small, and that's when you want to focus more on cancellation rate, demo rate. Not that you don't want to focus on that anyways, but that's when, like, if I'm you know, I'm just going to use Dylan as an example. If I'm Dylan and I'm at 105 leads so far for the month. On a shorter month, he's probably going to end at like 130 or something like that. I'm focused 100% on how do I get more of those leads to run. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to focus on getting less leads, but that's 100%. Even though he has a good demo rate and a decent cancellation rate for the amount of leads he has, can I get back 10% of those leads? Because now I'm getting back 15 leads now at this point, 12 leads now at this point, if I get 10% of those, right? But you know, when you're at 2, 3 a day, 1, 2, 3 a day, then you want to look at the margins. Where can you win more? All right, the next question, this is my favorite one. Setting people that are old age, that say they're going to die or they're going to leave it to the next person or whatever. And the reason why it's my favorite one is not because like I'm messed up and I like to talk to people that are in that situation. No, it's my favorite one because I think it's one of the easiest things to deal with. Now, you're not going to set 100% of these people, but you can set a good percentage of these people, 20%, 30% of these people that you talk to, you can schedule by having the right conversation. This is all about the conversation, really. So when the person brings that up, the first thing I do is I joke with them. Now, I don't joke with them like, you're going to, no, I don't obviously, but I'll make a joke like, what, at 26, you can't be older than 26, right? Or, and again, it depends on the situation. If someone is like, I have a terminal illness, then no, you're not going to joke with them. But I mean, those people that are, and I think what the question, Fox asked is clearly people that are old age, people that are like, oh, I'm not going to be here for much longer. I'm not doing this or whatever, Mr. Jones, quite frankly, you're getting around better than I can, you look great, I've ID'd people. I've had one lady comes to the door. This was when I was working with Seth, that guy who was on your team, Lou. And a lady comes to the door and she goes, oh, I'm 96 years old. I'm like, yeah, right. Show me your ID. I don't believe it. Go get your driver's license, And she's like, I don't have my driver's license anymore. I'm 90 whatever years old. And I'm like, well, go get your ID, ma'am. I'm not playing with you. Go get it. And she's laughing and she goes, all right. She goes and grabs the ID for me and showed it to me. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. That's wild. I would have guessed like 26, man. She's like, yeah, 1926, something like that. And I'm like, this lady's funny. She was getting around great. I remember this guy, I was walking with somebody and he had oxygen and he's drinking a Jack and Coke sitting in his driveway, nice summer day. And he had this truck that was jacked up. I couldn't get in the damn thing. And he goes, oh yeah, I'm not doing windows. I'm too old for that. I'm like, sir, is that your truck? He says, yeah, that's my truck. I said, you getting that every day? He said, yeah. I said, I couldn't get in that, sir. I think you're all right. And then I kept going with my conversation. Now the biggest thing that I ask that person is I'll say, I get real with them. I say, well, obviously, sir, all kidding aside, you know yourself more than I do. God forbid something was to happen. What would you do with the house, or who would you leave the house to? Now that might seem like a difficult question to ask. Okay. It's not to say that again, they brought it up. If you say to the person, sir, you look old. When you die, who are you leaving the house to? Obviously that's a problem, right? But if the person brings up, this is not inappropriate to bring up. This is a very, it's something that they have to think about. Now, most people are going to leave it to their kids, right? Most people, or their grandkids. Okay. I've gotten one person in doing this that said, the banks are going to take it. I don't have any kids. I don't care. And I was done with that conversation. That was it. Right. Every other person was like, oh yeah, my kids, right? That's a natural thing. Well, they're grandkids. So then I would say, okay, well, what do you think they will do? Oh, I can't type today. Stay in it or sell it. Okay. So I'll ask them that question. Now, most people are going to say sell it because think about this. If they're 90, their kids are probably 70, 65, 70 years old, right? If they are 90, their grandkids are probably 40 years old, 45 years old, something like that, right? So you got to understand that, that's why I'm asking that question. Most people are not going to stay in it. Okay. Either way, the question is answered the same. I'll say to the person, let's say the person says, well, they're probably going to sell it, all right, sir. I mean, I know that we're in a competitive real estate market. Okay. And I'll take this out in a second. I know we're in a competitive real estate market. That being said, this house is going to be very difficult to sell with windows like this. Okay. I know we're in a competitive. This house is going to be difficult to sell with windows like this. Okay. So something like that. Okay. You're telling them. Okay. And you might point out, let's say they say they're going to stay in it. And it's in the same vein, you're going to say to the person, well, sir, I do want to mention, obviously these windows are having X, Y, and Z problem. this is probably not something that you want to, an issue that you probably don't want to leave your son or daughter or whatever with. Okay. And so again, now you're bringing those people into it, Now, let's just stick to the selling thing at first. Our windows increase zone value, but more importantly, they're going to allow you to be able to, or your son to be able to sell the house if he was to decide to do it. Now, this is very important. I'm not proposing that you do the windows. May I make a suggestion? Okay. And you point out the problems first, of course. Okay. This problem, that problem, this problem. I'm not proposing that you do the windows. May I make a suggestion? They're going to say yes. Okay. And then you're going to say, I would suggest we come out, assess the windows, test them, and leave you with a free obligation. Oh, no obligation quote. So you can have some information set aside. You might even say, so you can have some information set aside, even to talk to a realtor about, right? Like, let's say they're going to sell a house or whatever. You're to talk to, to talk to your grandson about whatever. Okay. Does that sound helpful? Okay. And again, what you're setting yourself up for is, well, what's going to come up at that point? No, I'll let them deal with it. That's something that could come up. Well, it does sound helpful, but I'm going to let them deal with it. No, yeah, and I propose that, you might do that, right? But at least have somebody come out, go over your options, answer any questions that you have. The quote's good for a year, so you'll have plenty of time to talk to your son, daughter, realtor, whatever about, right? I have your last name as Jones. What's your first? So that's a good way to deal with people like that. I know it's a very comprehensive, it's a very long rebuttal because it changes your entire scripting. And here's the thing, guys, is that when you first start, I would never propose worrying about something like this. But when you dive into the job and you're here for a while, when we talk about winning on the margins, this is how you win on the margins, by being able to adapt to different scenarios and situations. This is something that works very well with people like that. Let's say someone tells me, I'm on a fixed income, I'm on Social Security, I'm on a fixed income. I'll tell them, and so they'll say, I can't afford this. I'll tell them that's ridiculous, sir. The fact that I see people out here that haven't worked a day in their lives driving around a Mercedes and, Cadillacs and whatever, and you've worked in this country for how long and you can't afford new windows, that's not fair. This is an American company. We understand American problems. That being said, we will figure this out for you. Let's have somebody come out, at least take a look at a couple of windows. What room do you spend the most time in? The living room. All right, we'll come out and just take a look at those 3 windows for you. We'll leave you with a free price quote. We'll try to find a way to make this work for you, which I'm pretty sure we can do. Okay, we'll leave you with that free information. So that way down the line, if you decide to do this, you have the information set aside. I'm sure that sounds helpful, right? It's winning on the margins, guys. Winning on the margins. That's what you got to do when you get more deeply involved in the job. And those are just some examples of how you do that. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay. Any other input to the old people thing? Go ahead, Seth. You don't got to raise your hand.
I love old people.
too.
They're fun. I mean, because they'll talk with you. I mean, if you let them, they'll talk with you all day. But they're the people that are saying, yeah, I'm going to die soon. It might sound macabre and everything, but think about how candid they're being with you and how honest. Like you're about to have an authentic conversation with somebody. They're not just saying not interested, right? They're giving you their honest, like, I'm going to retirement home or whatever else. That's honesty, and that's something to appreciate and to be thankful for. Like they're giving you their honest, like, hey, this is something that I'm dealing with or soon will be. So that means that they've already made plans, like they already have a contingency plan. And kind of like what Paul said, I don't know that I think, yeah, just once I've had one guy that's like, oh, bank's going to take it and I don't have any family and I'm whatever. But that was, one time. So what I like to ask as well for a lot of these people is if their kids are close or their grandkids live close too, just to kind of strike up again, not only the ability to make a personal connection, but you can make it make sense for them too. Like, okay, so you're going to give it to your kids. Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. But what are they going to do with it? They're going to sell it. They're going to keep it, whatever. then say, that's awesome. Actually, we'd love to be able to talk with them too. You know, if they're right down the road here, you said they're like, across town, I'd love to meet with everybody. The whole goal of someone even stopping out for you is just to answer your questions and then roll into the script, right? But just making it make sense for them. And why it's again, just a free service to take a look. That active listening part is really important, so they're a lot of fun. You can set a lot of appointments that way. And you see a lot of them sell too, because the kids then get involved and they're like, yeah, well, this is something, we want to make sure that we can have a seamless sale, or we're going to be moving in and we want it all taken care of. But you gotta be able to have those conversations. It might be uncomfortable at first, but I promise it gets easier, and they're authentic and they're real, and they're good conversations to have.
Yeah, and it's really not as uncomfortable as you think, guys. I mean, comfortability is really an option for you. I remember having a conversation with a lady right down the street there that had she had cancer, and she was going through chemo. She had lost her hair and stuff like that, and we weren't going to set her. I mean, I was going to try, but it got down to I mean, as simple as, ma'am, do you have people here for you? Do you need, I don't live too far away. Do you need me to go grocery shopping for you? Is there anything I can do to help you? And it was a very good conversation. And then the guy who I was with said, oh, well, at least you got a cool haircut. And that was uncomfortable. But up until that point, and then at the end of the appointment, he says to me, man, you really made her think about her cancer too much, I think. If that came from anybody else, fine. But from you, dude, I'm not going to deal with that right now. So, look, there's one more thing I want to go through. It's really the why. So, one of the things that in my journey in this company, one of the biggest things that was always important was having a goal in front of me. When you start here, I think that, everybody comes in for a different reason. I think that obviously, being able to create a good income for yourself is one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason, that people start. But a lot of people in the interview process, when I'm talking to people, I'll ask them why they want to come here, if they take the job, why they want to do the job. And for most people, growth is the first thing. And then the second thing is income. And then there's other things that fall in after that. Eventually, environment becomes an important one for people and stuff like that. But in the interview process, growth and income are probably the two biggest reasons why people transition to this and getting out of whatever job they wanted, they didn't want to do that they were doing. The reason why I bring this up is because what you guys got to understand about goals is when you think about it, the people that do the best have a higher reason than just, I got to get the next lead for the next demo, for the next sale, potentially, for my next paycheck. And the focus is for people that are the most successful there is on the income that they're having. It's on focusing on their leads. They look at their leads a lot more. They focus a lot more on their production, but it's also on growth. So how do we get there? When you think about it, right now, for example, we're gonna have this new sales program. I'm gonna share it with you guys now. Let me grab it from my computer quick, my other computer. But our goal is to make growth easier for people. The biggest thing is having this goal in front of your face that is sincere and important to you. So for me, failure has not been an option since I've been with the company because of what I'd have to resort to if I did not have this job, right? So what I was doing before I did this job, well, I got locked up for 19 months and I got into some trouble. I had gotten into a fight with a police officer's son. The police beat me up real bad. I had to have knee surgery because of it. I had to, fight for, I was facing 7 years, and I ended up getting 19 months in the suspended sentence after that. And I was fortunate for that. But the job I was doing at the time was after I got out was work a day. And basically what it was is you would walk to this place downtown, and then they would tell you, you'd come at 5 o'clock, sign in. By 7 o'clock, they would tell you whether or not you were working. And if you weren't, then you just had to walk home. If you were, then you would get driven out to this facility, and you'd make, for a 12-hour shift, you'd end up taking home $67 cash at the end of the day. And it was what it was. I needed to hold down a job for court. And I quite frankly, I didn't want to resort to the other things that I could have done for income that had gotten me in trouble in the past. So I ended up working hard to find a new job or whatever. And, in all my searches for a new job, nothing came up. I think I got an opportunity to where I was supposed to start at a cemetery, mowing grass and stuff like that. Here, I just gotta find this real quick. Okay. All right. And all of a sudden I got into an altercation. And I met a guy who worked for Anderson. When I met that guy, Wayne Grimo was his name. He gave me the opportunity to come do the job, which I did not want to do. But once I got started, I was making probably 50 grand a year at the time. The commission structure was much lower. The hourly pay was $825. But it was more than I was making. And I needed to maintain that. There was no choice. If I failed at that, then I would have to go back to either working at a place like that Workaday place, or getting in trouble, eventually selling drugs and doing stupid stuff. So I never thought of it as an opportunity, or as like, I never thought I had the opportunity to leave, right? Now, what that did for me, I mean, is that a negative or positive? Well, the company didn't take advantage of me in a negative way. So it is a positive. What happened was I put all of my time and effort into work to keep myself out of trouble. And in doing that, I opened up a path for management for myself, something I had no experience in, and quite frankly, wasn't good at when I first started. So, because of this, I was able to carve out a career path for myself that's more lucrative than some baseball contracts. I mean, you can, in a job like this, open up a career path for yourself. It takes time. I had to be very patient with myself and with learning experience, but you can open up a top 1% income for yourself by working through a job like this, because it's a sought after skill. But the biggest thing is patience and making the right decisions, loyalty to the company, loyalty to the people around you, the team, and having, realizing that you don't need to be the best, but you want to strive to be. Why? Because even if you don't reach that, even if you're not at 150 set appointments for the month or whatever, you're still going to make more income than you would have if you were like, it doesn't matter to me. Competition doesn't matter. And you're going to experience growth. You don't have to be the best canvasser to grow into a position in sales or management. You have to be good at the job. You have to be consistent. You have to have a positive attitude, and you have to show that you can get over hurdles that exist in front of you. So, for example, if you're running into some negativity on the road or on your team, how you deal with that is a reflection of you and your ability to lead. So let's just say, for example, that I'm on a team and there's constant negativity and issues going on inside of the team. And my choice is to sit in the back of the van, throw headphones on, and not focus on it. How is that leadership? That's not leadership at all. Let's say my reaction is to freak out and start yelling at people. Again, that's not leadership, right? But let's say my reaction is to come to my manager about it, say, look, I'm not comfortable with this. And then if nothing is done, come to me about it, for example. That would show leadership. That would show the right way to do things. It shows that you're able and willing to make the right decisions for the company. Okay. Let's say that a team member is struggling and they're not doing well. And they come back in the van negative every day. Degrading them is not going to be helpful, right? Giving them advice sometimes is not helpful neither. Most people's issues when they're going through that are much simpler than you can give advice for, right? Pointing them in the right direction, keeping them positive, and letting your manager know that there's an issue. That's how you show leadership in a situation like that. So fighting through your own issues and helping other people on your team fight through theirs are how you show leadership and how you grow. So I'm going to give you an example of one thing that we're rolling out to people that are new here. So what I say is this, is that if you've been here for a couple months, then you wouldn't have to start this program from the beginning, of course, obviously. But this is for people that are getting hired. Okay, so canvassing teaches you the skills required to make you a successful sales representative. Dealing with customer rejection using a scripted system, creating need through conversation, and identifying customer interest and needs. Our goal is to help refine these skills over time to create growth opportunities for employees entering our canvassing department. After an employee reaches key metrics, they will have the opportunity to take advantage of sales training, ride-alongs, and eventually a sales interview. So that we're going to do the same thing for management as well within our department and eventually other positions too. So the target metrics are between 8 and 12 months would be the canvassing time. The average amount of demos per week, if you want to get it done in 12 months, would be about 8. And if you want to get it done in, if you want to get it in 12 months, about 5, 8 months, about 8. A total of 250 demos though, over the course of time would get you there. Demo rate of 88% or above, right? So it's not even 90%. Having a positive attendance rate, which includes participation in additional trainings that are provided with advance notice. Okay. There are two different types of successful canvassers. This is something you got to understand too. There's high performers and consistent performers. High performers start off strong after training and produce more than 8 demos per week. The downfalls of high performers can include a low demo rate or a high not home rate because of the higher dependence on personality and personal connections, and the burnout, which can happen because of a high amount of intensity they put into their job. Consistent performers sometimes start slow, but they build success through their knowledge and the company's systems and script that they are provided. A consistent performer averages between 5 and 7 demos per week. Consistent performers are usually easier to train, but they can struggle more with adapting to at a rapid pace. One of the greatest strengths of a consistent performer is they're willing to be patient with growth, and they recognize the importance of continuous learning. Consistent performers don't always have the persistence and tenacity of high performance, but they focus on the quality and steadiness. They recognize the importance of every lead, and they usually have a high demo rate or a low not home ratio. Okay. Does that make sense? Does that all make sense? Those two definitions, do you feel like those fit those two groups of people? I'm looking for feedback on this, by the way, too. That's why I'm rolling this out here. I want to go through it with you guys, but I also want feedback as well. So just give me, maybe write down some notes if you have any feedback at the end, positive or negative, by the way, too. Then I want to hear it. I want to be able to make some changes to this if I need to. So the first evaluation would occur after 4 months on the road. An employee will have a one-on-one evaluation with myself. The employee's numbers will be evaluated based on the above metrics, and the employee will receive a written evaluation with specific instructions on how to move forward. If the employee has required metrics, they will move on to step 2. If the employee does not have the required metrics, they will, which by the way, too, is the average of 5 to 8 demos per week by that time, then they will receive a development action plan, and a second evaluation will be scheduled 4 weeks later. Upon completion of the evaluation, the employee will be given a self-evaluation to assess. So upon the completion of this meeting, the employee is given a self-evaluation to assess their level of preparedness for growth. This evaluation will discuss savings, time commitments, and the difficulty sales representatives can face. The second step is ride-alongs and Wednesday morning trainings. So this is month 5 and 6, assuming that the employee had the metrics, average of 5 to 8 demos per week, to be able to move on to the next step. After the employee's first evaluation, they will be scheduled for 2 ride-alongs with veteran sales reps, 1 per month. Preferably, the employee will be with canvassers that have grown into the sales department, and they will be assigned to canvassing leads. In addition to ride-alongs, the employee will attend Wednesday sales trainings in the morning conducted by Shannon Brent. After these steps are completed, the employee will have a check-in one-on-one with myself to check on metrics and to discuss their self-evaluation. Now, the importance, by the way, too, of the self-evaluation is, for example, we just ran into a situation where we had a guy who went into sales, and 3 weeks later, he had no money, right? He hadn't even started sales yet. He was still in training. Issue happened with his car, and he couldn't continue his training. We want to prevent things like that. I can't force you to tell me what you have in your savings, but I can tell you what you're going to need to have and ask what I can do to help you get there, right? Step 3 is month 7 to 8, aptitude and disc profile test, shadowing training, and continued ride-alongs. In month 7, the employee will receive a sales aptitude and disc profile test. After completing, they will meet with one of the sales managers to discuss the results. In month 7 and 8, the employee will continue going on ride-alongs and shadowing training that's going on for sales reps. And then step 4, final evaluation and sales interview. At the end of 8 months, the employee will be given a final evaluation to assess their overall performance and areas of improvement. If the employee has reached the 250 demos, the desired metrics, by this time, they will be scheduled for a sales interview. If the employee is hired, they'll be given a training date. If the employee continues with their production, if the employee continues with their production, they will then enter the sales training class. So if obviously they're given a date for 3 weeks later, and then the production just goes to the shit, then they're not gonna be able to move into that class. If the employee's production does not continue, they will lose the opportunity to be promoted into the sales role. At the end of the 8 months, if the employee has not achieved the minimum requirements, 250 demos, a timeline will be created for them to achieve these objectives, and that will be up to the 12 months. And then that's it. So positive, negative feedback. What do you guys think? Is there anybody in here that wants to go into sales eventually? Guess I'm asking the wrong group. Well, I guess something in the chat. Okay, so Charles, can you unmute yourself then and tell me what you think?
Lucas does.
Okay, cool. So Lucas, let's say that let's start with you, and then Charles, I'll go to you right after that. So Lucas, let's say day one, you're given this path. Does this make sense to you? Is it clear? And is it something that if you were hired yesterday, you'd be interested today? Obviously, you're kind of farther along now, but if you were hired yesterday, would you like this? What do you think?
I do. I think it makes it a little more clear as far to see without so much up in the air as far as guessing is concerned.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Good. And is there anything that you would change? Is there any questions that you have about that then?
No, I don't. I think you explained it well.
Okay, cool. And what my goal will be too is, let's say you decide, hey, sales is definitely where I want to go, then we'll sit down and discuss where you're at in this path, and then we'll get you in the proper place. My guess would be you're probably around that month 4 now, based on your production rather, so, we'll look into that. And then next time we meet, we'll have to discuss where you're at as far as this goes. Charles, what about you? What do you think about this?
Like Wells was saying, you explained it pretty well. I think it's a pretty laid down course of path where you know exactly what you need to reach just in order to get a ballpark range of where you need to be at.
Excellent. Good. Okay, cool. All right, good. Yeah, I think that what I had to do too, because at first when I wrote this, it was like another page and a half longer. And I realized, well, now I'm making people do like an extra 20 hours of work per week, which is, might be helpful for sales, but it's just going to burn the person out. So this, to me, the benefit of it is that, you're going on 1 ride along per month in the beginning, right? And then you could go on more if you want to, but 1 is required per month. You're going to Wednesday sales training that's at 10 o'clock. So it's, and it will arrange it for West and North too, or just do it over Zoom if we're going to have it be the same training. And that would be just once or twice a month too. It wouldn't be every single week. So it doesn't add too much onto your job, but it gives you the proper tools to be able to grow in the sales comfortably, and to have constant touch points. So, after that full month period, basically we're meeting once a month to check in on numbers and stuff like that, so that you can look forward to what you have to accomplish, right? Goals are important. Management's going to be a little bit less. It's a little bit less. I think it's an easier growth path in one way. Like it's in our department, so you can see what's going on. So you can kind of go, okay, I can get a feel for this. But in another way, there's less it's less of like, well, you got to do these specific things. We do trainings. I would say when I write it up, it will make more sense, but it's like participate in those trainings. Start to do some additional shifts, taking people out on your own, start to do training. So we'll focus on that, but it will be very similar. That way, then people kind of know what each path looks like, and it's very well defined. And then other paths too, hopefully will eventually open up too. Right now they do, but it's not something that is. I wouldn't put it on paper. Just be like, take for example, Julie. She became the assistant events manager. Well, that was, we have the right person to move into a role like that. So, a little bit of a different scenario, right? Any questions on this? Okay, it's 11:39. So we covered a good amount of stuff today. Okay, just to recap real quick. Let's see, pull this up. We covered the window problems and how much is too much, how to go over those in a simple way, and how to use the second part of your window problems to kind of make the appointment quality better, and to define the problems more. We talked about cancellations in 2 different ways. We talked about cancellations that cancel because they're unconfirmed, and we never get in contact with them. And we talked about how to keep those customers on schedule through the things that you say and the way that you say them. We also talked about following up on cancellations, examining the notes of the leads, organizing them, calling them back. Then we talked about being sensitive to different issues, and that kind of couples up with what we talked about with the older people as well. We talked about being sensitive to different issues that people are going through. If someone's really sick, how do you go about pitching that person? If there was death in the family, how do you go about that without, making people angry? We talked about Andersen windows and pitching Andersen windows. We talked about contractors, and then we talked about pitching the older people as well. So that's a good amount of stuff to cover. Does anybody have any other questions though?
I have one more.
Go ahead.
So whenever someone has a bad experience with us and they instantly are just mad at us when we get to the door, how do we try to give them a better look at us?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. And that goes a little bit deeper to something we used to teach a lot. I know we talk about it in training is emotional intelligence, but the reason why we had initially started teaching that was because coming out of COVID, one of the things that would happen is, where we were worried what would happen is people would freak out because of COVID. So I'd say you deal with this the same way. The first thing is you don't want to just walk away. You don't want to just go, okay, have a good day, and then walk away. Okay. And the same thing if the person is just pissed off about you being there, if they're like, unless they say get off my property, then you don't want to just walk away from the house. Okay. So the first thing is identify the issue. Look, Mr. Jones, I apologize. I definitely want to hear you out. If you don't mind, let me know what is the issue. Okay. When did you get the windows installed? All right. And then, listen to the customer. So, ask the question and listen. Don't interrupt the customer. Listen, very well. Take notes if you have to, and then let them know how you're going to deal with it, how you're going to rectify it. Well, what I'll do, sir, obviously, we have people in the company that will deal with this, and I will make sure that this gets addressed right away. What I'll do right now is I'll call my manager, and we'll make sure that we get somebody out here to rectify this problem right, as soon as possible. And then call your manager or call me. And then at that point, if I don't answer, give them my cell phone number. Let that person know this is the one group of people where you go, okay, I'll tell you what, Mr. Jones, just to make sure that we follow up on this, I'm going to give you my manager's cell phone number. Okay. I'm going to get this taken care of right away, and then give them my cell phone number. Don't set them for a lead or nothing like that. That will get sent over to service, or I'll have signature service reach out to them. But you really want them to know that you're doing everything that you can for them. That's what the most important thing is. So while you don't want to spend a lot of time on it, you can spend 30 seconds, a minute on it, and have that person happy, at least with you. And that should be your goal. Your goal is not to make them happy about the company while you're at their door. It's impossible. If they have all kinds of screwed up windows because we messed something up, which is rare, but it happens, then you're not going to make them feel good about that, but you can at least make them feel good about what you did to solve the problem, right? That makes sense?
Yeah, that's a lot better. That makes a lot more sense. And it's all right to give just your number out and just say, like, you can call this number if you have any questions or concerns.
Yeah, just let me know. Just shoot me a text and let me know that somebody might be calling me.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
That way I'm not blindsided by it. You're welcome. The other thing too is before you leave, make sure that they're good. So, say just before I go, Mr. Jones, I just want to make sure, is there anything else that I can do for you? Or do you have any other questions for me? You just don't want to leave preemptively. And then at that point, you're good. There's not much you can do besides that.
Beautiful.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, look, guys, I think this was good. We covered a lot of stuff. Obviously, the video is going to be up on the YouTube, and once it gets posted there, because it usually takes a couple minutes to load up, then I will send it to the GroupMe. Next week, our focus on Saturday next week is going to be to focus on callbacks. We got to get some good callback training in, because that's going to be a big way that we up our game when it comes to lead them out. And the lights just went out on me. That means we should be done, I guess. So we'll talk about that next week, though. There's going to be a couple different ways, guys, that we grow as a company. One of them is going to be setting objectives and reaching those objectives. Another one's going to be getting the callbacks done, extra things like that, extra Saturdays, doing trainings like these, and handling issues. The biggest thing is going to be you being focused like crazy on your goal. That's going to be the most helpful thing that you can do, is get excited about whatever you want to do, right? Growth is something to be excited about. Growing your pay is something to be excited about. Dealing with customers in an effective way and winning those conversations is something to be excited about. So get excited. We get the best season coming up, guys. It's the 25th now. I know it's cold today. It's going to be 57 degrees tomorrow. And then we're going to climb into March, and it's going to be, 45 to 60 all the time, maybe a little bit warmer. Daylight's going to be out. It's going to be beautiful out. And you're going to see a difference in the way customers react. Definitely. Okay. So just understand that that's coming up. So let's get prepared for that. Get all your training done. Make sure you have your script and rebuttals done. This next month is your month to start the 7 to 8 demo a week thing, and then to continue that on through April, May, so on and so forth. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. I will talk to you guys soon. And Seth, if you want to give me a call in a couple minutes too, you don't even have to yet. Just give me a call later.